to Perspectives in Focus. I'm your host, Tia Young, and we have a thought-provoking and compelling show for you. I have a question for you. What do you do when you watch a loved one die because of mistakes and irresponsibility of those very professionals who have taken a pledge to care for and save the sick and the disabled? Well, our guest and family suffered through such an ordeal 25 years ago, and she is here today to tell her story. Jo Hamilton, welcome to Perspectives in Focus.
Thank you.
How are you today?
I'm great, thank you, Tia.
That's very good. Well, I've got to tell you, about a week ago, our producer Sal Lima gave me your book to read. And normally during the days, I'm super busy running here, running there. I never really get a chance to read until in the wee hours of the morning, late at night, wee hours of the morning. So my plan was to read your book over a 3-day period. Well, I got the book, I started reading it, I couldn't put it down. The next thing I know, it was 7 a.m. in the morning and time for me to go to work.
Yikes.
It was so compelling, and it touched my heart to the very core. I also have to tell you that it was a healing experience for me personally, because almost a month ago today, actually, I lost my brother to complications from prostate cancer. And we, had to go through the emergency room route. And it was a very traumatic experience for myself and for my family. We got through it. And I really didn't think much about, what happened, because when you are in the presence of doctors and nurses and professional people like that, you have a tendency just to do whatever they tell you and not question anything. I sometimes find that there is just a slight air of arrogance in some of the hospitals, and you just, whatever they tell you to do or whatever they say, that's what you go along with. But today, we just want you to tell your story. I have tons of questions to ask you, but I really want to hear your heart and your feelings for what has happened to you and your family. And then moving into just a nightmare, just a living hell that I'm sure you and your family have experienced.
Yeah, well, if anybody, of course, that reads a book will know that I'm Iowa's biggest cheerleader. I love my home state, and in retrospect, looking back, we had our animals, and we had open spaces and fresh air, and plenty of things to keep us busy, and we had our family. So we were never bored. It was never dull. It was as far as we were concerned, it was like heaven on earth. And we had a pretty idyllic life. A lot of my friends who have grown and raised in the city often comment to me, you just had everything. It was like Lassie. We loved Lassie. And that's the life I wanted. And, it was hard work. It was in the 60s, and, things weren't, our household wasn't exactly modernized yet then, so it was a lot of hard work, but we didn't know any different. So, growing up was what my parents made it, and they didn't look at it in a negative way, and so we didn't either. But yeah, we just trudged along and did our own thing and had a great time, and we all participated in a lot of sports. My dad was very athletic, and he passed that love of athleticism on to us. And being raised with 3 brothers, I didn't have a choice, because they weren't going to play house with me.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So I became a softball player, basketball player, golfer, and I tried my best to keep up with them. So, but my little brother Scott, who grew to be the biggest of the family, he was the best athlete of all of us, and my dad had played semi-pro ball in his youth, and he always kind of had a dream in his head that one of his sons, he had 3 of them, and one of his sons would grow up and be a ball player too. And Scott definitely had the most talent in that area. He played golf and basketball and baseball and football, and when he was 19, he could throw a fastball 95 miles an hour.
95 miles an hour?
Yeah.
Wow.
So he definitely had the gift, and he was invited to try out for spring training with the White Sox, Chicago White Sox, the year between his junior and senior year of college. And they invited him to come back after he graduated to try out on their farm team. So we were all pretty excited about that. And then one day he was complaining of a backache to my mom. And our little town we had a phenomenal doctor. He was a osteopath, so he could prescribe medicine and everything. But he had a gift of compassion and healing. And so Scott went to him. Mom made him an appointment, and he went and thought he needed a treatment. He was working construction in between the summer, so Mom just figured he'd pulled a muscle or something because he was also playing softball with local teams in the area. And so he went and never said anything to her. In a couple of days, the doctor called my mom and said, you know, I'm a little worried about Scott. And she said, why? And he says, well, I found a lump in his groin, and he said, it's about the size of a small baseball. And he said, I don't even know how he's walking around, let alone working and playing softball. And he said, I think he needs to go see a specialist. So
He was in great physical shape.
oh yeah, he was in the prime of his physical. And you know, he was about 6'4". He weighed about 195 pounds. He was tall and lanky, but he was definitely in good shape. So the next thing I knew, I had lived in Virginia at the time, and I got a phone call that he was going to be seen by a specialist. And my parents and my brothers had planned a trip to Virginia to see me, but they were going to postpone it. So he ended up having to have surgery. They removed the lump, the tumor, and it was malignant. They also removed one of his testicles and told us that he had testicular cancer. The really scary thing was that he had a mass in his abdomen, that it had already grown and metastasized, and they were concerned about the speed of the growth of the cancer. So they contacted my parents and a doctor and said he needs to make a decision right away, but he should start chemo because this is moving fast, and you know, you can't wait. So they, you know, we all came together. I flew home and we all talked, and he actually wanted to come out east and be treated at NIH or Johns Hopkins, and my parents were really opposed to that. They wanted him close to home, and I had to work, you know, obviously during the day, and they were concerned who was going to be with him, you know, in case he needed help. So everybody voted, and he got voted down, and they ended up staying in the Midwest. And he picked a hospital about 4 hours away from us, but it was a well-established, very reputable hospital. Presidents would go there to be seen, and they felt pretty confident that that was the best place for him to go get his treatments.
And that was a commute back and forth from Virginia
Yeah,
to Iowa?
well, from Iowa to, this was in Minnesota.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
so, and he had to go once a month. He'd go for 5 days. His series of chemo was 5 days, and then he'd have 3 weeks off, and then he'd come back the next month and go for 5 days, and then come back home. And I mean, he was doing great. He survived the first 3 treatments. He, you know, eventually lost his hair, and you know, he was weak, but he continued to work his construction job, and you know, pretty much went about his normal life. And he did end up losing his hair and all the other things that go with the side effects of chemo. But he, you know, we all had a positive outlook. They told us he had almost over a 95% chance of full and complete recovery, and there isn't any reason why he couldn't continue to have a normal life and just go on about his business. And he'd just gotten engaged, and you know, he was all excited about that. Everything was just right on track. His life was just, couldn't have been better.
Joe, what happened?
Well, what happened was after his third round, they did a CAT scan, they did blood work, and his cancer was completely gone. There was no sign of cancer in his body. Amazing. They told him he was in complete remission. They don't use cure with cancer because, you know, there's never really a cure for cancer.
Yes.
But he was, as far as he was concerned, he was home free. And so they said, we really want you to go and have one more treatment. And he had initially signed up for a trial because there was this new drug called cisplatin, which was a new chemo drug, and they were trying to get a lot of information and data about the drug. So he agreed. It meant that he would have to have some extra blood drawn, and they would monitor him probably much more carefully with side effects. But he agreed to do that, and they said, well, so he was telling them, well, great, then I'm done, right? I don't have to have any more chemo. And the doctors are like, well, we think you should have another round because it would guarantee you'd probably never have to worry about cancer again. And don't forget, you signed up for this study, this trial, and we'd like to continue, having that data for future purposes. And so he really didn't want to do it. And he called me on Thanksgiving, and he said, what do you think I should do? And I said, Scott, I don't know. That's really your decision. But they're the experts. I mean, that's what they do. And if they're telling you you might have to go for 5 more days as opposed to worrying about the rest of your life being cancer-free, I don't know. Maybe you should think about that. So, basically we told him it was his choice. It was his life and his body, and he should think about it and do what he thought was best. And I think he kind of got shamed into coming back. Right. He wanted to do the right thing. He wanted to keep his part of the bargain. So he went back for the 4th round, and they hooked him up on Monday, and within a couple hours he started feeling kind of weird, and he told my parents, who were with him, and his fiance, that he felt really sick. And normally he never got nauseous because they had nauseous medication that would keep him from becoming too sick, and they administered that, but he just got worse and worse and worse. And so my dad questioned the nurse, and he said, this isn't normally the way that he responds, and it seems kind of quick for him to be feeling this bad. And they're like, oh, it's just, he's just psychosomatic because this is his last treatment. He wants to get it over with, so it's probably just an unconscious reaction.
They always have an answer, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
They always have an answer.
Couldn't be anything but. Well, so he went through the first day, and by the second day, he was just screaming in pain, and he had lost his hearing, was going. He couldn't hear. He started having nosebleeds, and things were just going south, and he was begging them to just please stop the treatment, that he just couldn't stand it. So my dad and mom again asked them to, what was going on. Maybe they should stop the treatment. At one point, I think my dad even said, if you don't take the needle out, I'm going to take it out myself. And so they called the doctors in. They all had a little conference and basically said, there's nothing wrong. It's just the chemo. We speeded up the drip a little bit to help him finish maybe a half an hour sooner or a half a day sooner. And they gave him more Valium and more pain medication to kind of quiet him down. But they told my parents, they said, you have to talk him in to keep going because, he's in this trial and he really needs to finish this trial. And plus, if he doesn't, he might get the cancer back.
So when you say trial, that was like an experimental?
It was because they were gathering the data for this cisplatin, this new drug, yeah.
Well, Joe, we thank you so very much for sharing on Perspectives in Focus. And I'm sure the producers are going to want to have you come back. Will you promise to come back and share more with us? Because we like to know more about what's happening in the future for you and your family. Okay. It's just a compelling story. And again, I thank you so much. As I said earlier, it's been healing to me. And just thank you. Thank you so very much. And thank you, audience, for listening. And we look forward to seeing you in the next Perspectives in Focus. Good day.